I got all I want, and I got all I need, and I got everything. I got you and me. All I want, I got all I need.
Marriage is the best. If I were to attempt to encourage a couple who's struggling right now, I think I would want them to know it'll get better. Coming to the end of oneself in a marriage is normally a long process full of struggle. Straining for years and years, often in the same cycles and patterns. One major theme in couples work is the idea that we fight over the smallest, dumbest things, or that we've been straining against the same problem our whole relationship. But instead of assessing where those patterns tend to come from, today I just want to tell you that it'll get better. Not to cheapen your suffering or belittle the struggle, simply to frame up that if you're struggling in your relationship, you should not give up hope. Marriage is truly the best, but that doesn't mean that marriage is not extremely difficult. If that's all that you needed from today, feel free to stop here, because if you've been encouraged by what you've heard so far, anything I could add at this point will only cheapen your process. Just know it'll get better.
All I want, and I got all I need, and I got everything. I got you and me. All I want, I got all I need. I got.
For those of you still here, please like and subscribe. Ugh, gross. Just kidding. If you haven't already been encouraged, I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story. So last week was pretty rough for me. I told Becca that I was tired and struggling with the demands on us and our lives and our family. Or at least I would have said that if she would have let me. Instead, due to her own exhaustion, taking care of 6 babies can even be considered exhausting, she shut down and left the conversation basically, and I left the conversation feeling completely unheard, uncared for, unseen, and disconnected. Not in like a, oh, poor Peter sort of way. I don't need pity or sympathy, but in like a really deep, authentic, marriage is hard kind of way. I was angry at that point, and it led to a couple of rough days. 3 days, but who's counting? I wasn't willing to simply put away my hurt, cheapening it further, subjecting our relationship to underground resentment via resolving to just be unheard, unseen, and uncared for. So, instead, I let my anger have some small spot inside me while I chose to work through my responsibilities at the house day to day, with the kids, the dishes, the meals, etc., etc. 2 days after the bomb, I talked to Becca about where she was at in our system, and she talked to me about all the things on her mind. It was a lot. I think she most likely felt seen and heard in her struggle. The next day, I wrote out some thoughts regarding the way I was feeling and resolved to explain to her where I was at. That night, I let her know just how disconnected, exhausted, and overwhelmed I was with all the weights in my own world. Thankfully, at this moment, she was able to hear from me, and she responded in a loving manner. So much of our marital disconnection in the teamwork phase comes from the limited capacity both of us have to accomplish all that life is demanding of us. Hearing each other out, responding in love, making each other feel heard and seen and cared for in our individual struggles oftentimes softens those hard hearts that come as a result of being unseen. Becca sent me a reel that said most marriages would be saved by going to bed early, holding each other's hands, staring in each other's eyes, and talking for a few minutes before bed. If you'd like to try that, you can. We have also been implementing something that I recently touched on either in the last episode or the episode before that, which is the rule, always be touching. It's been fun, connecting, and honestly calming to our nervous systems to have a general blanket rule to always be near one another and to find time for skin-on-skin contact in a loving and connecting way. Since our 3-day spat, we have made regular connection points, conversation points, and the ease, love, attraction, and peace has been mostly restored. As I reflect on this story, this little snapshot of our relationship, I notice a few things that are patterns that Rebecca and I have in our relationship that keep us from the 4 horsemen, that keep us from building resentment, getting contemptuous with one another, criticizing one another, always being defensive and stonewalling or shutting each other down. Now, that doesn't mean that those things never happen in our relationship. It doesn't mean that sometimes Becca isn't critical, and it doesn't mean that sometimes I don't shut down. It just means that when those things occur, we choose to address them. So in the first part of the story, I was attempting to reach Becca in her moment of kind of feeling overwhelmed and exhausted by letting her know that I was feeling overwhelmed and exhausted, which did not go over well. And basically, what happened was she was feeling so unseen in her system that she wasn't able to, at that moment, reach out and see me. Now, you could argue like that it was her responsibility to reach out and see me at that point because I was the one asking for it. But ultimately, that's just not how marriage works. Marriage doesn't mean you are always ready to do what you are really called and responsible to do. But instead, sometimes it's just, you're going to miss each other. You're going to miss. Sometimes Becca is so overwhelmed and exhausted that she can't really see from me or hear from me or understand where I'm coming from, because she, in and of herself, she within her individual self is feeling similar things or is struggling in some way. And so in the normal course of marriage, there is oftentimes an opportunity for repairing those broken things. It wasn't Becca's intention to break those 3 days, but as a result of both of us feeling exhausted and overwhelmed and stressed, and from our system and from the support that we were hoping to get from our spouses, our partners, unfortunately, that moment created a rupture. If I were to have let that go and moved on and not addressed kind of that moment into the future, I think that I would have built up a resentment within me. I would have seen a pattern of me meeting her needs and her not meeting mine, or a pattern of her getting seen and heard and cared for while I sit out on the sideline feeling kind of, just disconnected and misunderstood and unappreciated out on the sideline. So I chose to allow that anger to be present with me because it was telling me something very clear. It was telling me that something was broken in my relationship. And in order to address that anger, it would have been inappropriate for me to just shut it down, to say, anger, you don't mean anything to me. You're not that helpful. You're not going to, help me to, get beyond this. And so I'm going to turn that off and I'm just going to continue on. That kind of attitude, which oftentimes feels like almost like a loving attitude, is oftentimes the start of a really destructive cycle of allowing oneself to be unseen and unheard from and disconnected in the relationship. And sometimes it is absolutely worth letting go, if you can, in such a way that doesn't lead to resentment. But when we hold on to those things and they do pile up inside of us, they add to the stack which is a previous episode that we did. Those things oftentimes lead to very destructive, disconnected places and patterns in our relationships. So instead of that, in our story, Peter eventually, after a few days and after, being willing to see and hear where Becca was at, was able to address the rupture within the relationship, the disconnect that he was feeling, now speaking in the third person, by reapproaching that conversation with new, fresh eyes, a couple of good nights sleep, well, for me, and being able to circle back around and have a renewed sense of conversation with my wife. And so I guess the other point of that, right, is like the other note in the session, in the story, is that I was able to reach a place within myself that my anger didn't shut my ability down to hear from Becca, to hear how she was feeling, to hear how she was doing, to hear and feel how overwhelmed she was in all sorts of different parts of our system, to understand her mental load. And I think that she really did need me to understand her mental load before she could extend that hearing, seeing, understanding on the other side. Now, that does beg the question, okay, well, if my partner isn't willing, like, what do I do? And if I'm injured or if there's a rupture on my end of the relationship, how do I get my spouse to like hear it or see it? And one of the key kind of components that make marriages really healthy and make them work long-term is to see your partner as someone that's on your team and to see your partner as someone who is well-intentioned toward you. And so one of the things that I can tell you to not do is allow yourself to feel as though your partner isn't seeing, hearing, or understanding or knowing you because they just don't want to. It is not just because Becca didn't want to understand where I was coming from or that she didn't care, even though I left feeling uncared for. It wasn't that she didn't care where I was at. She was just in a vulnerable place within herself, and she was unable to really hear or see things from my end because she was in a very vulnerable place. So instead of seeing her as, after 3 days and processing and praying, speaking with mentors or, somebody else about what's going on, after a lot of process, I was able to get to a place where I was able to see her not as an uncaring, unwilling person, but instead as someone who was vulnerable and someone that was carrying their own stuff. So when you can see that within your partner and when you can offer to them feeling seen and feeling heard and connecting with you such that they are known and understood in their own suffering, that often will open the door for repairing those ruptures like it did in our story today. So the first minute was all about it'll get better. And in one sense, the story that I told you is actually the reason that the idea of it'll get better kind of came into play. And the reason that I wanted to stop you from listening after just that first minute was because if all you needed to hear was that it can get better or it will get better, that's great. And I want you to walk away encouraged and to see your partner in a positive frame, knowing that it can get better and that you would continue to be resilient and work on your relationship as you continue to live life together. The story that I wanted to tell you was if you couldn't just hear that message, I wanted you to have something to kind of hang your hat on, to be encouraged by something real, like a really real marriage dynamic. This is the kind of stuff that I run into constantly in marriage counseling. And so if you were encouraged today by either the first minute or the rest of our story today, or even the reflection on our story, I would love it if you would go on YouTube and like and subscribe our episodes. Listening over there was actually one way that we could actually build more of a not a following, but more traction. And so the Apple thing, we've gone a few months without having a 5-star review, at least one that was written, not just like clicking on the 5 stars. So if you haven't gone and written a review, that would actually be really appreciated, because that does help out kind of reach and wanting to kind of get to more people. The YouTube thing is kind of a longer game, where if we can get like a bunch of subscribers and a bunch of people watching, eventually it can monetize. And then, like last time I was talking about that idea of kind of having a giveaway basically every month for getting people out and away, and spending a couple of nights away with one another to encourage marital intimacy and satisfaction and friendship. Yeah. Encourage marital friendship on the weekend away. Because that's exactly what it looks like, being good friends. So if you wanted to do any of those things, it would really bless us. And maybe the person that would find this thereafter, after you, would be blessed and may actually want to share even more. So feel free to do that. I think that is all for me today. This is the end.
All I want, and I got all I need, and I got everything